Superheroes. They're like really popular, and they have been for a couple of decades now, but not everyone is a big old shiny blockbuster film, nor are they all just like low budget knockoffs either. No, some of them are just downright weird. And today we're checking out 10 of those, 10 strange heroes in capes and tights that are not quite ready for their big franchise tie-in. Number 10. Our first entry is actually going to keep the weird factor on the lower end of things, and it's 2009's Defendor, which kicks off with Mickey Knox being evaluated by Dr. Yang and flashes back to his superhero identity with this very familiar theme music. There's also Casey Jones and Nora without her playlist, and Defendor is after someone called Captain Industry and is arrested, where we find out that his real name is Arthur Poppington. And this film was the directorial debut of Peter Stebbings, who's also an actor with a pretty extensive filmography, and still directs TV shows pretty regularly. Defendor uses some unusual weaponry like a jar of wasps, but he's still just a regular guy. He's got a tragic backstory and is saved by ye old hooker with a heart of gold, and oh hey, it's CJ. And you know, almost all of these actors are involved in one superhero universe or another. Woody's in the Spider-Man universe with Sony. Kat Dennings, of course, is in the MCU. Michael Kelly is in the DCEU. Sandra Oh is in Invincible. And Elias Koteas, I guess, is in the Turtle universe, which is, I guess that's superheroes, right? And then, speaking of people with ties to superhero universes, Jennifer Walters pops in really quick. Oddly, this came out 1 year before the James Gunn film Super, and they both hit some of the same beats, but are also very different films. They both have a central character becoming a masked vigilante, and both are treated very realistically. They both have the hapless sidekick girl whose vulgarity takes our hero aback, and they both have a main character who wrestles with distinguishing fantasy from reality, and around the middle, Lieutenant Riggs shows up as a henchman. And like I mentioned, on the weird spectrum, it's on the lower level, and in a world that super exists, even though it came first, that movie did it better since this doesn't quite have the emotional punch that one did, and the middle of this seems to really not know what it wants to do with itself, but it's a pretty enjoyable watch.
When you break the law, you're a punk.
Number 9. Okay, this next entry is weird in a couple of ways, but for the most part isn't that strange until I get to something that I'll talk about in a bit. But it's Argo Man, the Fantastic Superman from 1967. And first off, yeah, the movie itself is pretty weird because you've got Argo Man here and his secret identity, Reginald Hoover, and he has an Alfred-like butler, and he also is kind of an arrogant prick. Instead of being a hero for being a hero's sake, he takes payment in the form of expensive things, like the Mona Lisa. And here's why it's kinda weird. Argo Man loses his powers for 6 hours after having sex. But he's such a voracious ladies' man that he's almost always having sex. And he seemingly has cameras just like in women's bathrooms in order to get in touch with them for booty calls. He has some sort of telepathy, but also telekinesis, which he uses to force a hovercraft to shore because he sensed that it had a beautiful woman in it, and then again to literally fly her to him against her will. Again, arrogant prick. Then he challenges her to a marksmanship challenge and tells her that if she wins, she'll be allowed to leave, and if she loses, ladies and gentlemen, your hero. So this character wasn't adapted from any existing comics and was created explicitly for this film, which was Italian, and is often considered a camp classic, a film that's become a comedy, albeit an unintentional one. Reginald, whose identity is not a secret, is enlisted to help find Jennabelle, the notorious jewel thief who just so happened to be the woman from that hovercraft, and what ensues is a weird heist, action, superhero film in which our main character doesn't appear as Argo Man until the 40-minute mark. And okay, why is this weird? Besides what I've already mentioned. Oh, and the molesting robot. Well, it has to do with the trailer I saw that first told me about this movie. In it, Argo Man uses his telepathic powers, except he says this.
Kill each other. Kill each other.
I mean, that's a pretty extreme power, right? You aren't going to see that in the MCU. So I got really tempted to watch this movie based on a psychotic superhero telling everyone he encounters to just kill each other. He says it like 4 times in the trailer. But then, he never says that in the movie. The closest he comes is this hilarious moment in which a guy tries to kill himself and jumps out a window, but Argo Man uses his powers to save him, only to get briefly distracted.
It's Argo Man.
But I had been lured in by the whole kill each other power, which is not in the movie at all. Except there's an alternate opening to the film which isn't on any of the standard releases, with a new prologue with Argo Man in China. Not only does this give us a glimpse of the character in uniform way earlier in the film than we got, but more importantly, he stops the Chinese army by doing this.
Kill each other.
So here's why this is weird. Here's why this is just perplexing to me. They thought that this bit was so crucial to the film that they put it in the damn trailer. And not just once, they overdubbed him saying it on top of parts of the film in which he's doing other things. So they clearly thought that this whole kill each other power was a draw. But then when it came time to release it, they were like, nah, too much.
Now put this with my other trophies, will you please, Chandra?
Yes.
Number 8. Now let's go to 2018 and Eclipse, The Rise of Ink. And important to note here that it's a part of the Bach universe, because we're going to come back to that later. We start with Casey, who bumps into a girl and apologizes for like a minute.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Here, let me help you.
No, I'm sorry.
That was my fault, wasn't it?
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
And then, within 30 seconds of meeting this girl, he knows about her mom in a coma, and that her favorite flowers are tulips, and that he rode a bike from North Carolina, and he is a superhero destined to save the city from being destroyed within 24 hours. That is literally within the first 3 minutes of this movie. We're then in an office, and this dude is looking straight at the camera until he realizes that he is. Whoops. We then meet super rich dude Michael Parks, and the girl is his little sister, and she's like immediately attacked on the street, but Casey steps up to save her, leading to, this.
Shut up.
Stay down, kid. Heroes never give up.
And then, this.
You've been a very bad boy.
And they're using a comic book as a sort of prophecy of what's going to happen, and they're looking for someone called the Reader to help them decipher it, and have to fight off a gun-toting comic shop owner in this scene that almost killed the editor part of me.
George, please! What are you doing? This isn't you!
And then yeah, you remember that one scene from Spider-Man? Well, this ain't it. And this is just so weirdly awkward. It's like it's a movie made by aliens who only learned about human society through Marvel movies, but just don't understand basic interactions. It's like bordering on the room levels of who thinks anyone actually speaks this way, and clearly does not have a big budget. IMDb listed as $50,000, but I'm actually kind of doubting that, and this was written and directed by Alexander Bach, who is the Bach in the Bach universe that I was mentioning earlier, and he's clearly trying to build something up here, talking about this catastrophe, the coming of Airman, some eclipse that's a big deal, and Casey has powers, and then, bear with me, the Parks' mom, who had just recovered from her coma, suddenly transforms into this guy who is Airman. There's just a lot going on. Casey gets trained, and let me tell you, low-budget fights are always a treat because I guess you want to look like you've got some good action going on, but then you get stuff like this. And then when Casey finally comes into play, this is his big introduction.
I am ink.
And I don't know why he's ink when his powers seem to be electrical based, and he fights Airman, which is pretty hilarious. And I'm kind of just imagining that you're an actor and you sign up to be in this movie, and you're pretty excited and you're gonna be a superhero, and you show up to your fitting and they hand you this for the suit. And yeah, I'll make fun of this one, but it's pretty damn entertaining. And hell, this guy just saw these superhero movies and was like, hey, I can do that. And he went out and, well, I mean, he kind of can't do that.
Superman, but he is just imaginary. And here we stand.
But damn it, he tried, and then kept trying, because Sam in his slick outfit here tells them about Eclipse and seems to set up more, kind of like an Avengers initiative. And then I'm gonna try to figure this out here. There's this big party, and everyone is there except for Michael. And there's a scene outside saying he can't make it. And then there's a big speech where a guy says what Michael would have said if he were there. And it's a big moment, spoken by a character that has never been in a movie before. He's introduced just to do this. And I really think that Michael was supposed to be doing this. But the actor was unavailable at the last minute, so they wrote this in to kind of cover that up. Or at least that's my guess, because otherwise, it's just weird. But then, this list is all about weird.
Now, Mr. Kana, ready.
Number 7. You know it's going to be weird when the Troma logo kicks it off, and it does for our next movie, 2016's The Middle Finger. You've got Dennis here, who's getting ready to go off to college, and his friend Simon, and he's an awkward kind of outcast kid who gets tied up as a prank by a bully, and he's contacted by an alien named Belzar that wants him to help him track down an evil presence on Earth. Belzar turns him into a superhero whose head is a big middle finger and gives him powers, although it takes him a bit to get used to them. He also learns he's not quite as invincible as he thinks he is, and has to face off against a guy who can transform into a tail-like thing. He's got a sort of spider sense that tells him the crime is nearby, and it's pretty clear that the intention was to make a sort of a Napoleon Dynamite becomes a superhero movie. It's got that, oh, isn't this so quirky vibe going for it, but it's amusing enough, and was both written and directed by Seamus Hanley, who also plays the role of the middle finger. And he also edited the film, so it's a bit of a one-man show going on. He ends up having to take on the end of the world, losing his powers for a time, and I suppose you'll enjoy this depending on your sense of humor, since it's clearly very low budget and rides the whole indie film brand of comedy, and I got a kick out of it. I guess even at an hour 20 though, it does feel a touch long, but it's not like it drags, and it's definitely weird. Maybe give it a shot. Number 6. We've now been to Italy and Ireland, so now let's go to Japan for 1990's Big Boobs Buster, which has Misako here, who is in love with Bando, but is rejected due to the size of her chest, which devastates her. So, she does what any sane person would do. She steals a list that has all the schoolgirls' measurements on it and selects any girl with large breasts. And I should point out that they refer to this list as the Big Boobs list, like I guess the school calls it that. She then puts on a costume including a set of falsies and goes over the girls on the list, and okay, this is really what she does. She makes a mold of their breasts and says that if they don't stop using their bustiness to seduce men, that she'll show the mold to everyone. In order to stay safe, the girls resort to strapping themselves down to appear flatter, and yes, that's the actual plot to this movie. Technically, I guess Triple B would be considered a villain vigilante because she's just randomly attacking women, and she's soon facing off against women in metal bras, who she defeats with a car battery that literally just manifests out of nowhere. Like, where did this come from? And it's fairly bonkers, but oddly enough, treated pretty seriously. Not too seriously, mind you, but it's definitely not simply played for laughs. And it gets weirder as she starts training to a pretty kick-ass metal montage. And given the details that I've just said, you're probably expecting some adult content, but it's actually pretty limited to topless girls in non-sexual situations. And yeah, after a point, it kinda just shifts away from the whole superhero thing and becomes about track and field, because that makes sense, even though the big race ends like this. It's only 45 minutes long and sort of ends on a cliffhanger, so I'm kind of curious to know if this was intended to be the first of a series, but it doesn't look like it was ever continued, so maybe we truly have seen the last of Big Boobs Buster. Number 5. Next up is 2013's Squidman, which starts off with one of my favorite views. Ah, Pittsburgh. I miss you and I don't. We meet Squidman approached by a writer who's doing a book on superheroes, and Squiddy has been fired from his super team, and he can't get another gig because his powers are limited to shooting ink from his fingers. That's his powers. He gets hired to try to find a lost file clerk, although he's less lost and more gone feral. It's very clearly low budget, although there's no indication online about how much it cost really, but I'm assuming it's pretty low, and was both written and directed by Charlie Klein. Squidman's best friend is his former sidekick who has given up his super identity, mainly because he never had any powers in the first place and only signed up to be a superhero in order to make money. SM comes off as a bit of a douche at times, and it's revealed that he actually died in action once, but was saved by aliens, and he hasn't recovered from it, and has a supervillain named Lord Paradox, who he defeats in a super inside joke comic book way.
These tasty treats are so wonderful. My dreams of conquest suddenly don't seem so important.
And it's very clear that this takes a good deal of inspiration from The Tick in a way, except the main character is not as inherently charming. It's got some good stuff going on, but really starts to wander in the middle of it, and doesn't really seem to have a solid direction, and it feels like this probably would have played better as a short. It gets high concept around the ending, which might be a bit much considering how low-key everything that came before it was, but it's a nice little film and worth a watch. Even if it kind of lost me in the middle, I still enjoyed checking this one out. Number 4. Let's get a different take on things with a touch higher budget with 1995's The Adventures of Captain Zoom in Outer Space, which sets us on the planet Pangea, which is under the rule of the evil Ming-like Hellboy, who kidnaps the princess, who would not only be a superhero later on in The Tick, but also in Dr. Horrible. Her people include Uhura, and little Bailey here has a robot that's basically Rosie from the Jetsons, and he finds a TV transmission from Earth that shows an old superhero show called Captain Zoom from 1953, and he's also bound to be another superhero as Turbo Man. And get this, Bailey assumes that the transmission is real and decides that he needs Zoom to help him fight Lord Vox. So he beams him up to his planet, where Zoom decides he has to play along and pretend to be something he's not in order to help out. And yeah, If this sounds familiar, you should know that this came out 4 years before Galaxy Quest, and even though they share some pretty similar plot points, they're pretty different films all around. Zoom encounters alien life forms, enemy troopers in super cheap costumes, and it gets a little strange when he's freed by the evil princess, a la Flash Gordon, but sex with him overloads her psychic powers, and he escapes. It's actually quite a bit of fun and a nice little space tale, but there's one major problem, and that's Captain Zoom himself. He's written as a bit too much of a prick, and Daniel Riordan doesn't really play him with the right kind of charm needed to win you over to him. It kind of makes you realize how fine of a line that Tim Allen played his character to balance that, and what a tough job it really was. And before I accuse Galaxy Quest of ripping this film off though, this movie definitely takes a page from a certain James Cameron flick.
Still don't see anything!
9 meters!
Where are they?
8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2 meters, 1 meter, they're here, they're here!
The crash must have messed up her circuitry. She's clearly malfunctioning.
And some of the elements are jarringly similar to GQ, including an arena fight, and some of the things he encounters being based on episodes of the old show. And I certainly wouldn't call that a ripoff of this, I guess, but it does make me wonder if they knew about Captain Zoom. And this was still a good time. It's definitely flawed, but cool and weird and enjoyable, and even though they had made it with the hopes to do either more movies or a potential TV show, there were never any follow-ups.
That's why Captain Zoom is here.
Number 3. Our number 3 here is a movie I have just been waiting to find a reason to cover, and it's 2022's Dragon the Weapon of God, which starts with a press conference with New York's mayor. And when's the last time you saw a mayor of a city that looked under 30? I find it hard to believe that New Yorkers would vote for a dude in a suit that doesn't quite fit right and a man bun. And hey, maybe focus. Focus. And there's some subtle performances here.
This is my city! This is my city! I want all the exits locked down. Military, NYPD units, call me the SWAT. Call me the SWAT, damn it!
And there's also this janitor who works for the mayor, and the mayor and his crew are shown to be racists. And for those of you that are very sensitive to me pointing out racism in videos, the characters are shown to be blatantly racist. It's a plot point, so there's no need to whine about it in the comments. Thank you. This is Jake, and he's described in the film's plot synopsis as a teen, but he's losing his hair. And this is Alexander Bach of Bach Productions, who made Eclipse, The Rise of Ink, and he's cast himself as the lead here, so of course he writes in that the female lead is instantly madly in love with him. The mayor becomes more unhinged, and this guy. I'm really assuming this part was written for Tommy Wiseau, and they couldn't get him, so they got this guy, and we're like, close enough.
Are you kidding me?
You came for an up.
But there's also this group called the Black Order that are a criminal group trying to enlist Jake as well. And I love this. This guy is supposed to be a cop hassling them.
See this badge here?
I don't, actually, because it doesn't seem like they could afford one. There's no badge there.
See this badge here?
Jake's friend gets shot, so Jake transforms, which takes his shirt off. And to be clear, this power burned off his shirt off screen, but didn't affect his pants, his necklace, or his hat, just his shirt. This guy shows up and says Jake's the dragon and he's God's favorite weapon, and they mention Kitty, so this is in the same universe as Ink and his friends. I also love this.
Imani was right.
No, she wasn't.
You can't.
That's what she wants you to think.
You can't understand.
So what happened here is that Bach said his line early, but then realized that Grace had a line still, so stopped. He said his line early and then corrected himself, but then kept that in instead of doing another take. Look at his face. That face says, oops, just go with it, finish the scene.
Imani was right.
No, she wasn't.
You can't.
That's what she wants you to think.
You can't understand.
Bach proves himself the master of turning a phrase.
I take off your hands for you.
You put a finger on her, and you get all your fingers squeezed and cut in your butt.
What does that mean? And there's definitely subtlety on display.
I am the savior that these people want. I'm the savior that this city wants and needs. They asked for me.
The mayor's plan is to literally wall off the city and hunt down black people, but the dragon shows up wearing the same shirt the dude in Eclipse wore because money, and has a fight scene that they film like this in order to hide the fact that no one here knows how to fight. And I watch this because I want to stress that dragon rolls across this table to punch two women who were literally just standing there doing nothing. When they capture the mayor, they find out that he has a super-powered assistant as well that he says that he recruited from China. And, you know, Eclipse may have been silly and cheap, but this is like Neil Breen levels of filmmaking. There's just so much wrong with it, but it's wrong in ways that are profoundly amusing. Problem is, it's an hour and 45 minutes long, which is just too much, and the novelty wears off after a while. But I mean, look at these fight scenes with befuddled tourists in the background who were clearly not like extras or anything. They're just people that were there while they were filming, thinking, what the hell is this? And seeing two people who have probably never even held swords have to fight with them and look like experts is pretty funny, especially when it's apparent that they just did it slowly and then sped up the footage. Near the end, Jake shows up in full costume, which is just a Spider-Man suit with the logo replaced, and this is how he makes his entrance. It's just really weird because it's the equivalent of your neighbor's kids dressing up and playing superheroes with about the same level of fighting ability, and the over-the-top acting is pretty extreme. But yeah, at about a half hour shorter, I'd have called this an accidental comedy masterpiece. Like, this scene near the end has this terrible sound.
With Idrissa gone and the Black Order's over, I don't have anything left.
I'm sorry for that.
But we know that they had microphones because Jake has a mic pack in his back pocket here. And I should point out that Bach has another film coming out called Donut Kid that seems equally bonkers and has plans to release 3 more over the next couple of years, culminating in a movie called Eclipse Alliance, which says will be a crossover featuring characters from all of his movies. Number 2. Let's get really weird now with 2000's Masked Avenger versus Ultra Villain in the Lair of the Naked Bikini. Is it weird, you say? Well, it starts with this guy in a work suit and a rubber gimp mask engaging in some self-gratification with a hooker in a hotel room, and that guy is, I guess, being hired to find this guy's wife?
Let's see, did you bring the panties?
I bought a photo of her.
I don't need to see the photograph, I just need the panties.
And her kidnappers are set up on the beach. Our hero shows up chopping off penises, and his superhero name, of course, is the Masturbating Gunman. Yes, that's his code name. And it was the original title of this film. His powers, I guess, include using one crook's intestines as a rope to disarm another, but his kryptonite is nude women, which causes him to collapse in a fit until he takes care of himself. There's then Helmut Gunther here, our villain who's trying to create a perfect son, and challenges his henchmen to go find a perfect virgin for him. The gunman's got a sister who's a nun that he gives money to because she runs an orphanage, and a sidekick who tends goats. So this one is Australian and the work of Mark Savage, who mostly works as a cinematographer, but has also directed quite a bit himself, and it's sort of a tribute to Japanese pink films, which were essentially their version of exploitation films. Most were kind of bizarre, but would also feature content of a more sexual nature, and Big Boobs Buster would be considered a part of this genre. When Helmut kidnaps Sister Mary for his impregnation scheme, and let's face it, if what I've said so far doesn't let you know what you're in for when watching this one, if that description doesn't just make you say, yep, that's a weird superhero movie, then I'm not sure what will. This is weird. Let me reiterate, this is a superhero called the Masturbating Gunman who sniffs panties in order to solve crimes, fighting against a Nazi trying to impregnate a nun to create a new master race. But since they say that he has to jerk before he can work, they throw a stream of strippers at him to send him into a masturbatory frenzy. That's the plot. Oh yeah, did I mention the acid semen? Well, I did now. It's just a straight up bananas movie that I definitely recommend in terms of saying, oh hey, this was weird. Number 1. Earlier I mentioned James Gunn's Super, and it's a great flick and totally fits on this list, but I think most people already know about that one.
Shut up, crime.
So I'm actually switching this up because Gunn actually had an even weirder take on superheroes way before that with 2000's The Specials. Granted, he didn't direct this one and just wrote it, but it feels very Gunn, and I love it, so it's my number 1 here. And if you haven't seen it, prepare for a blast of familiar faces like Penelope, Soda Pop, Randy, the Sandman, and A Criminal Mind. That lady that you know from Living Color, and pretty much only Living Color. Gunn's brother Kraglin, John Doe from freaking X. Say goodbye to these, Kitty, Gunn himself, and if you happen to be like really into Scrubs, Lloyd. They're a supergroup called The Specials, who are like a lower tier group, and they're the leader, the Strobe, Ms. Indestructible, Mr. Smart, Nightbird, the Weevil, Amok, Minuteman, Deadly Girl, 8, Power Chick, Alien Orphan, and the not-so-smart US Bill. What are their powers? It doesn't really matter. They're not going to use them. This film's more about their day off and welcoming Nightbird as a new member and the possibility of getting a toy line, and they've got a lot of issues going on. Strobe and Indestructible are married and having issues. Weevil is planning on leaving the group and is sleeping with Mrs. I. Plus, their toy line ends up being a bust. And I think this is where I fell in love with Judy Greer. And they basically disband and sort of self-destruct. Gunn credits this movie with getting him all of his future gigs in Hollywood, even though it ultimately wasn't that successful. And there's minor cameos throughout, including a young Pam, who was then Gunn's wife or girlfriend, Taryn Manning, and Sabrina too. As I mentioned, it wasn't directed by James, but instead was by Craig Mazin, and Gunn is not happy with the finished product, mainly because of the direction. Mazin would only go on to direct one other film, if you want to call it that, superhero movie, that parody thing. He did find success in different ways, writing the second and third Hangover movies and that hilarious superhero comedy show, Chernobyl. If you're looking for superhero action, you're not gonna get it. This is all about what they do when they're not fighting crime. But like most of the comedies from this era, there is an elaborate dance scene. And I love this. I know it's a bit uneven, but the characters are great, and the story's fun and fresh, and everyone seems to give it their all. It's kinda clear from how well he juggles so many characters here that Gunn would go on to be able to write some of the solid super teamwork for the MCU, and now I guess the DCEU. So there you have it, 10 really kind of off-the-wall superhero movies, a little bit bizarre stuff, but you know, nothing too crazy. Well, maybe a couple. But I really enjoyed most of these. I'd say probably about 80 to 90% of these I thought were really fun and worth watching. And I enjoyed almost all of them. and they're really good stuff. If you haven't seen them, I recommend checking out most of these. If you haven't seen Super, I recommend checking that out as well too, because it's a fantastic movie that I strongly recommend. But if you could think of any other weird superhero movies or off-kilter ones, leave me those in the comments down below. Make sure they are weird superhero movies though. Like don't like comment, oh, Hellboy, isn't Hellboy a weird superhero movie? No, it's not. It's a superhero movie. You know, give me some more off-the-cuff kind of things, some weird stuff. If you could think about it, put it down in those comments. Or if any of these look interesting to you, let me know which one of these you now want to seek out and check out. But yeah, do all that. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you like what you see on this channel, please hit the subscribe button, and that little bell will notify you when new videos come out. And you can also check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines and help support this channel. It'd be pretty awesome if you did. Like these guys, they're awesome, but you're awesome too for just watching these videos, and I'll see you very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.